Hi, everyone. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the themes for 2025. Now, Kathy Rose, my good friend and colleague, and I have already produced a very comprehensive video looking at the astrology month by month for 2025. There's a lot of detail in there, and I'll put the link for that video below. This is more in English. There are some astrological references, but anyone who isn't at all well versed in astrology can easily follow this. So, because I'm just going to be looking at some of the broad themes, so it's a different perspective, if you like, on 2025. And I may be covering, in fact, I intend to cover quite a few things that wouldn't have been appropriate in the video with Kathy. So I hope this will be additional information for you. 2025 will be a year like no other. It will be dynamic, historic, fast, event-packed, and extraordinary. And it's very interesting that in numerology, this is a 9-year. It's known as a 9-year because if you add the 2, and the 5, you get 9, and that's very much a year of completions. And of course, the theme that Kathy and I chose for our video was completions and beginnings, completions and new beginnings, and that's exactly what we're going to see. It's a really big year of transition from the old to the new, and that's energetic as well. In Chinese astrology, I know very little about Chinese astrology, but it's the year of the wood snake. And apart from all that Chinese astrology says about the year of the wood snake, the snake is an animal that very much keeps secrets, but this, and it's very related actually to Scorpio as a sign, but this is the year when a lot of truth is going to be revealed. It's already starting to come out in a much bigger way about many, many things. And here I'm not just talking about the obvious things over the last few years. I'm talking about the history of the earth, the history of humanity, the history of ancient civilizations, that we're going to realize that our earth and the civilizations upon it are greatly older, massively older than we have ever understood. So I think it's revelations on that kind of scale, not just some of the obvious ones. So, and a snake is also an animal that sheds its skin. And when it sheds its skin, again, I'm thinking of the symbolism of Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio here. Things are never quite the same again. And they won't be. After 2025, things will never be the same again. And I actually wrote that, I think it was in my first book, I wrote that about 2020, and I think that was certainly true. It's true in a bigger way for 2025, because 2025 is an even bigger year. And I'm not talking about the kind of challenge that we had in 2020. We're way beyond that in our consciousness and in our energy. So yeah, very different. So very big year of awakening, of the expansion of our consciousness, and certainly big endings and big beginnings. We don't have to wait for the endings until the beginnings begin. The beginnings have already begun. They're simultaneous. And I think one of the overarching themes for 2025 is, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human? And I mean that on so many levels, as probably will emerge as I go through this. The energies are fast and they're volatile. They particularly will speed up from the middle of the year, from July through to November. That's the period of time that Uranus is in Gemini, and things will speed up even more during that period. But the whole year is fast, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon, because we're just making jumps in our frequency, in our consciousness. We have a lot of water being emphasized, particularly around, I'd say, March, April, but also October time, a lot of water. So we could see a lot of instances of flooding, etc. I'll talk more about those as we go through, but also we've got a lot of fire energy with both Neptune and Saturn moving into fire. Aries, primal fire. The element we're most short of probably is earth, because although Uranus is still in Taurus up until July, and it returns again in November. Uranus is the planet of instability. So if we're looking to the element of Earth to give us more stability, Uranus isn't going to necessarily help us with that. So that's the element we're probably short of. And that's why it is more important than ever that you ground. Bare feet on the earth, bare feet on the grass, if it's not appropriate weather to do that, as in winter in the UK or in other countries where it gets very cold and wet. You can do that with a grounding mat, an earthing mat. You can do that with breath work. You can do it in many ways. You can do it with yoga practice as well. There are many ways. Turning inwards is the way that you ground yourself, because there's going to be an awful lot of the out there. It is very easy in 2025 to get mentally jazzed up, really buzzed up. And that's going to be, again, particularly true from July to November, while Uranus is in Gemini, because Gemini is to do with our mental processes, our neural networks, the information coming in at us. It's a naturally curious sign. It wants to search for information, social media, but Uranus is going to speed it up to an enormous extent. So it will be very easy to feel mentally overwhelmed, and therefore even more important to ground to earth, and also to drop into stillness. Remember, booking stillness meetings with yourself. Do that every single day, multiple times a day. Amp up that practice. Stillness, grounding, breath work. Your state of being is your absolutely top priority, to a degree that it has never been before, to such an extent. And I could stop the video right there, really, because those are the most important things. We are going to have, as I say, an awful lot of the out there, a lot of events happening in our 3D world. It can feel quite chaotic and spinny as that old world collapses. And the reason the old world is collapsing is there's just no more, or a reducing amount of low vibrational energy to sustain it, because the direction of travel, the life force, the astrological energy is moving towards these higher frequencies. And so many of us can feel this and know this in our bones. So super important. Stillness, just turning inside, closing your eyes, dropping into your heart, listening to your heartbeat. So simple. Following your breath, 100% focus. And I'll put the very simple 10-minute video I did for the yogic baby belly breath. That is absolutely so easy, so elementary. Every single person can do it. And that's a great thing to have in your toolkit, especially if you're feeling kind of speeded up or anxious or panicky. Drop into the yogic belly breath. If you can't sleep, that's a very good practice. And it's absolutely dead easy. So everybody can do it. So I'll put that below. I think increasingly we are going to see, and I did mention this with Kathy, see the Earth as a living consciousness of Gaia, with which we are interacting on a much grander and deeper level than we've probably done in our lifetimes. We've just felt that we're separate from nature, that we can exploit nature and take all her resources, and didn't really think too much about it. Well, that is really going to change, particularly with the nodal axis moving into Pisces North Node and Virgo South Node. We are really going to start to get in touch with that ancient wisdom of Gaia, reminding us all of those ancient gifts and skills and knowledge are going to come back to us. And because Gaia is going through her own upgrade, and of course we are moving with her, at least on the higher timeline, we are moving with her for sure. And I also want to say that people, and this is a little bit of astrology here, people with planets 0 to 3 degrees of the cardinal signs, they are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, are going to feel very activated this year because both Neptune and Saturn are going to be moving into Aries this year. For Neptune, it'll be the 30th of March, and for Saturn, it will be in late May. And they will come together most closely within about half a degree in July. And then they are totally exactly conjunct on the 20th of February 2026, but we're going to get a very good idea, a glimpse, if you like, on how that's going to work, that conjunction, which is going to be very prominent in 2026 and a lot of 2027 as well. And for those of you who have planets between 0 and 3 degrees of the cardinal signs, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to this link below. You get a 2-part video series that you can watch to infinity to explain to you where these points fall in your chart and what it means for you. And it's not a personalized birth chart reading. These are teaching videos. But if you have planets in those areas, 0 to 3 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, you may be activated into a position of leadership in 2025, not in the old-fashioned way of top down and telling other people what to do, but in the sense of being a pioneer or a visionary or a teacher or something where you are helping other people as we move through this massive transformation and transition, helping other people in some way. You're stepping up to lead in a very inclusive and a very loving sense, not in the old-fashioned telling you what to do sense at all. People born in 1952 to 1953, and also people born in 1989, and in all of those years, there was a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, may feel this particularly in 25 and 26 when Saturn and Neptune are coming together yet again with another conjunction. So it's a reliable 36-year cycle. So they may feel particularly activated. And again, if that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is falling on any of your planets or square or in opposition to any of your planets, you're going to feel this, 2025, and Kathy talked about this beautifully a great deal in our video. This is an opportunity for a whole new you, whoever you are, a whole new you, but particularly with what I've just described there. 0 to 3 of the cardinals or born in 52, 53 or 1989, there is an even bigger opportunity for a whole new you to start to operate at a very different level. And because I don't know which planets or angles it's falling on, I can't say exactly what that is for you, but you will get a very strong sense as we move through the early months of 2025. Also, people born with planets or angles between 0 and 3 degrees of the mutable signs, and those are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces. Because Uranus is going to be in hard aspect to those between July and November this year, you may, particularly through those months, July to November, feel very restless or agitated, or there's a strong desire for more freedom, to break loose of any constraints, any stillness, any routine. And again, I can't say exactly which area of life because it's down to the planet and the house area, but you could feel real breakthroughs this year, real breakthroughs into a different state of being. You want to just let the old go. It's a kind of quantum leap of energy into that which you have already outgrown. And so there's a sense of breaking the mold, genius ideas, out of the box. You might want to live an alternative lifestyle, live in community. And you could be hatching some really genius innovations, particularly if this is aspecting your Mercury, let's say. It is going to be a much bigger time of transparency because truth is coming to light, a lot of awakening happening. And the entry cards to these higher dimensions are very much integrity, humility, and heart-centeredness. Integrity, humility, heart-centeredness. Absolutely. Those are the entry cards to getting onto these higher timelines that are going to take us further and faster, and also being in service to others. It will be clearer and clearer who is in service to self and who is in service to others. And I think it's undeniable. And I said this on the Kathy video as well. I've mentioned it elsewhere in recent updates, that I think it is undeniable that there are two very different and diverging collective timelines. I mean, there are an infinite number of timelines that we are hopping to in every moment, but there are two broad collective timelines that are diverging rapidly. One is the more synthetic, technological, more warmongering, more service to self timeline, following the narrative. And the other is based on love. It's service to others. How can I help? How can I share? How can I heal? Complete transparency, humility, and heart-centeredness, as opposed to the technologically centered focus on the lower timeline. And that is going to continue for some time. I can't say how long, because it depends on the collective consciousness. Ultimately, we are heading for unity consciousness. You know, I've often used that analogy of the slow track and fast track at an airport. Ultimately, we all get on the unity consciousness plane, aeroplane, but for a period of time, there are two very different collective timelines. So be in love. Be in love as a state of being. That's the way to get onto that higher timeline, where life will be a lot of the extreme events that are going to be happening on the lower timeline, you are bubble wrapped from. That's not very good English, but there's a sense of being buffered to some extent. There's a smoother ride. It's a smoother ride on that higher timeline of love. You will continue to see the collapse of the old order, the passing away of the old guard. Just let it go. Please don't make that your focus. Just let it go to dust, because the energy is already gone. You know, the underpinning foundational energy has already gone, and that's why we're seeing this collapse. So in previous times of Pluto in Aquarius, it was the reduction in power of the church or the autocratic monarchy. As I've said many, many times, this time around it's the collapse of corporations, institutions, governments that do not have our highest good in mind, and therefore we're seeing things like the German government collapse after a no confidence vote. Same for the French government, that's collapsed after a no confidence vote. The Assad regime in Syria has collapsed. Just let it go. Just let it all go. I think the Canadian government is very rocky. Quite recently, the Deputy Prime Minister, who was also the finance director, resigned just literally a few hours before giving the autumn financial statement. So that rocked the Canadian government. So we'll see what happens to that. But this is going to be happening to various governments around the world, and just let that go. And as I've said in the past, I think the EU is going to go through a period of challenge. We can see that starting now. Transiting Neptune is opposing the ascendant of the euro currency and squaring the midheaven. So that's kind of the identity and status of the euro as a currency. Transiting Uranus is conjunct the moon in the chart of the EU. So that is the people. And for sure, we are going to be seeing a lot of revolution. If you look back to historical cycles, Pluto in Aquarius, it has always been about the beginning of the shift of power to the people, and much more revolutionary energy from the grassroots up. We're seeing that with the farmers in so many countries, the Netherlands, France, the UK. We're seeing big revolutions in Serbia against their governments because people were killed in a collapse of a canopy at a railway station. 14 people killed, many injured. And so that protest has been going on since the 1st of November against the corrupt government, who they say are not caring well enough for the people. So we're going to see this all as, just just allow that to happen. For some people, they're going to be joining those protests, part of the revolution. If you feel that's your role, then that's right. For other people, they have a different role. There's no judgment in this. We all have our unique piece of the puzzle as we're moving through this massive transformation. 2025 is the biggest year of transition from the old to the new. As we get into 2026, we're finding our footing much more in the new. This is the crossover year, the biggest, clearest year of transition. That's super clear because all of the outer planets are changing sign or beginning to change sign through 2025. And there are many other bigger cycles that are feeding into this that I've talked about. The end of the processional cycle, 24,000 years, the end of the of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness is ending in March 2025, as Bibhu Dev Misra has talked about in his very detailed academic study, or his book is called Yuga Shift, that you can get great detail. And he's saying that Kali Yuga, Age of Darkness, is ending in March 2025. Many other cycles that I've referred to, this kind of convergence of huge time cycles and smaller time cycles is happening now. I think we are going to see radical changes beginning in many systems, old systems, the educational system, particularly from July onwards, because Gemini has quite a lot to do with the educational system of young people. So Uranus is there from July to November. The judicial system, the medical system, financial system, the political system. I think we're going to see the beginning of the end of any kind of celebrity worship in Hollywood. And the reason I'm saying that is Neptune's gradual move out of Pisces. It begins to move out of Pisces 30th of March, but it will be fully into Aries certainly by the January, February 2026. So, and Neptune in Pisces, which it rules, has been to do with the illusion, the glamour, the videos, the celebrity, the tinsel, the glitter. And so it's the beginning of the end of the illusion of Hollywood. I also believe it's the beginning of the end of many lifetimes of deference to external authority figures. And not only has Pluto moved out of Capricorn now, but the fact that we are going to have Neptune in Aries and Saturn in Aries, there's a kind of dissolution of authority figures. Neptune, Saturn, dissolution of authority, old-fashioned, patriarchal, traditional authority. So all of those things working together are a continuing theme. We as people are taking back our sovereignty, and that's just indicated in so many ways. Also, I think it's the beginning of the end of traditional religious structures. The church as it's been. I'm not talking about faith here. I'm not talking about spirituality. Spirituality is going to be strengthened and boosted. I'm talking about the kind of the dogma, the ritual of traditional religious structures. I think this is the beginning of the end of the reduction of authority with those two. For sure, our psychic sensitivity is increasing. All of the clairs, the clairsentience, audience, cognizance, etc., will definitely increase. And don't worry if this isn't happening to you yet. We're all on separate timelines, and you are where you are meant to be. But be aware that you could be feeling greater sensitivity to energy, greater compassion with people. I feel this massively with animals. I mean, I've always had a huge heart with animals, but oh my goodness, it's just really, it's a kind of, I find myself in tears a lot with any kind of tough situation for animals, be that local or on a bigger scale. And there's just such a sense of connection there. So you'll all be feeling in this in in different ways. And with that comes this much greater sense of multidimensionality, that there's time slippage. I talked about this back in my Saturn in Pisces video in March 2023, the dissolution of linear time, Saturn. And there's time slippage, but with it, it's two sides of the same coin, a much greater sense of multidimensionality. Our dreams will get better, are bigger, and there's just a real sense of tuning into energy, greater healing gifts, greater gifts with telepathy. This has always been the case, that you think of someone and then they phone you, but that's going to be to a much greater extent. And ultimately, we are moving towards communicating telepathically for sure, and getting rid of the gadgets. With that, there will be a much broader recognition that everything is energy and frequency, which of course it always has been, but everything is energy and frequency. And with that, there is a greater awareness that the earth has never, ever been so electrified, and increasingly so. We have satellites all over the place. We have EMFs from smart digits and devices everywhere, Wi-Fi, and all of that is going to increase. So where we become more aware of the damaging effects of that on life, but also we become more aware of the natural emanation of frequencies from our sun, the solar flares, the coronal mass ejections, and how that is elevating our frequency. So both are more intense. The natural and the unnatural are more intense. And we're at the peak of solar cycle 25. We're going to have more very strong solar flares, coronal mass ejections. In 2025, we could see a real peak in those. We could have a kind of Carrington event possibly that takes out some of the internet or power grids, power outages for some time. I don't think necessarily that's going to be global and protracted. But nevertheless, I believe that absolutely will occur, because it's going to be testing our systems. Now, all of this, both natural and unnatural, tends to destabilize the ionosphere. Everything is connected. That's connected into the energy of Gaia. So we may, again, I think, undoubtedly, not just may, but undoubtedly, we are going to see more seismic activity, more extreme weather events. And that's going to come in various forms, because we're going to see, I believe, more flooding, particularly March, April, when we have a whole lineup of planets in Pisces. Again, in October, when we have strong water emphasis in the astrology. And the fact that during the months when Neptune is at 29 degrees of Pisces, the anaretic degree, we could see a lot more flooding, tsunamis. Saturn conjunct Neptune is about the limits of the sea. Saturn limits the boundary of the sea. Neptune is the sea level going to change? Because that's part of the whole flooding issue. I also think we're going to see some droughts. We've seen these extremes already in 2024, flooding in some areas, droughts in others. I think droughts will appear in some areas as well. It's very difficult to predict which, but Saturn in Aries, it feels very dry. Uranus is linked to, and that's going to be at the anaretic degree of Taurus for the first half of the year for sure. And then again, November, December, that's linked to very strong storms, hurricanes, high winds. When it's in Gemini, an air sign, July to November, that's going to be very strong as well. So, both natural and unnatural, we're going to see extreme weather events. And I think we are very likely to see more land masses emerging from the sea. Land masses emerging from the sea, I've talked about this a great deal. This is linked to Pluto square to Haumea. And with that, we could see ancient civilizations, temples, cities, that's Saturn in Pisces too, coming up from the sea. And that's going to be extraordinary in terms of resurrecting old knowledge and wisdom as well. But certainly, I think even the Earth's map could start to change a little bit in 2025. And I can't say exactly which month, but I would watch March, April for starters. I think there's very strong energy around that. And with that, of course, we could have some population migration as well. And I'm sure we will all be guided, but not to go interfere with this at all, to see this as literally new Earth, which it is in a sense. It's old Earth, but it's new Earth coming up from the seas, and those areas could be extremely fertile with new life, new plant life, new sea life on them, and very, I believe, very unpolluted. And by the way, so much is going to be cleaned up in our air and in our waters in terms of pollution. Virtually every day, and sometimes several times a day, I'm posting brilliant innovations on my Facebook page of principally young innovators. Remember, Aquarius is linked to youth. And these are genius ideas, incredibly simple ideas by young people who are taking, say, waste that's damaging in one area and just transmuting it into something which provides free energy or which is useful in another way. I mean, absolutely genius ideas. So if you want to follow those, I post them, as I say, very regularly on Facebook. Too many to mention here, but solutions, innovations, particularly coming from young people that are sympathetic to the earth, in harmony with nature and the earth. Many of them just free to produce, are thrilling. So keep your focus on that and those. Keep your focus on the innovations, on things that are solution-based, people coming together in communities to work as a team with these ideas as well. So, and very importantly, that as we become more aware of the damaging effects of things like EMFs, smart devices, etc., satellites, equally many incredible technologies, and I'm going to be sharing some of those in January, actually, with some people I'm speaking to, but where technologies are being developed that are in harmony with humanity and the earth. So they act as protective bubbles if we are sitting in those bubbles from the damaging effects of EMFs, etc. And they are beautiful technologies, some of them galactic led. I'd like to say more about that in January. And that is really thrilling, because I think a lot of these ideas are going to come from our connections, our greater connections to galactic beings and maybe even inner Earth beings, both of whom have incredible intelligence way ahead of us. And, I know there's a lot of stuff going on about drones and things at the moment, but overwhelmingly the galactic beings are benevolent and are wanting to help us through this, because the Earth is in a pivotal place in the galaxy. And so they want Earth to succeed in this evolution, which undoubtedly it will. But if they wanted to do us harm, they've had the last 200,000 years to do it, and they haven't done it yet. So I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't go interfere. And just think of all the beautiful channelings that come from those beings as well. So the solutions, focus on the solutions, because they are so, you don't focus on the problem, focus on the solutions, because they are just going to pour out. Many of these solutions have already been developed, but haven't been in the public sphere to date, haven't been allowed to be in the public sphere. They are going to emerge very quickly. A lot around free energy, actually. On the lower timelines, just to be aware of this, and please don't make it your focus, but for some of us, we'll be kind of hopping between two timelines for a while. There will be kind of louder war drums, and again, just don't make it your focus, because if you make it your focus, you'll energize it. You'll keep it on life support. There will be more attempted censorship, undoubtedly, happening. Equally, there will be many solutions. There will be more social media channels and even internets, which are censorship free. And the way to access those is really gather together with like-minded people, because like-minded people in communities are going to act as fantastic information networks. So you set a clear intention, if you haven't already found them, set a clear intention that you are meeting and coming across the perfect people who are like-minded and share your vision of New Earth. And from nowhere, you'll find that these people pop onto your radar, and that is the way that you're going to get in contact with these solutions. I do think there'll be more independent journalism, absolutely, for sure. I think mainstream media, as we have known it, and I said this back in March 2023 with Saturn moving into Pisces, because Pisces is linked to the media and Saturn limits. And so I do think we are going to see a shrinking of the mainstream media as we've known it, and more independent journalism, and also trusting our own intuition to a much bigger extent. Certainly new digital developments, new digital education in a bigger way, new digital currencies for sure, and particularly look out for the localized, decentralized microcurrencies and investigate those, because the direction of travel is certainly digital, for sure. Also, I think precious metals hold a lot of potential for our future too, something really solid that we can trust. So I think they're two broad areas to investigate. I think because the energy is so volatile next year, we will see quite a lot of financial volatility in the markets and values of things like cryptocurrencies. But the long-term direction of travel, I think, will be precious metals and digital currencies, away from fiat currency. Much more awareness of us as sovereign beings, and really get in touch with that we live from the inside out, not the outside in. I cannot emphasize that enough as we go through 2025, that you, as you wake up in the morning, you set your focus on the emotion that you want to live that day. I am love, I am joy, I am gratitude, I am peace, and just beam that out to the world and to everyone you come into contact with. It transforms your day-to-day reality. I can't tell you how it's transformed my challenging relationships, which are very few now, but where I had them, I just kind of loved them into oblivion, in terms of the challenges. And really do, and remember, Hope Fitzgerald's infinity wave is wizard for that too. But start to see yourself as a sovereign being, master of your own frequency. This wonderful Buddhist vision that there is only us here, that everything in our reality is defined by our inner state. And I absolutely believe that and live it on a daily basis. But in general, we'll all become more aware of how our individual frequency, both individually and collectively, affects those realities. We'll be much more astute about that process. And also our manifesting abilities will be much faster, much cleaner, more honed. So be careful with that, because whatever you're thinking and feeling, you will tend to manifest much more quickly. Become much more aware of your belief filters, because they define your reality as well. I'm always a loser, and you will be. Life treats me badly, I'm always a victim, you will be. So really become very cognizant of your belief filters and just erase them, and step into a state of loving transparency. Loving transparency. Authenticity is a really big one this year. Being living your unique essence, not being part of the crowd. We're stepping out of being part of the crowd. Celebrate your uniqueness, your authenticity, your thinking out of the box. Don't run from it as you may have done in the past. A greater sense, increasingly, of unity consciousness. And really do remember this sense of simplicity, breath work, stillness, grounding, sound healing, meditation, candle gazing. Simple, simple, simple. The world is going to be more complex than you've ever known it out there at the 3D level. Just step away, come back to simplicity and stillness. That is going to be worth its weight in gold. Just to close your eyes and drop into stillness. Can you listen to the birds? Can you hear the sound beyond the birds? Can you just hear the heartbeat of Mother Earth? Just warmth. Can you go deeper and deeper into that stillness? That is, I cannot recommend that to you enough as pure gold in 2025 and ongoing. Also, we're going to be living with much greater intentionality, always setting intentions. I mean, before every important conversation, I've said this many times, before every important interaction, conversation, and certainly video, I will always set clear intentions. This is for my highest good, the highest good of all, and the highest good of the earth. Always. And by the highest good of all, I mean all of the animals, all of the trees, all of the sentient beings. I mean all living forms. Because that can only help. Because if you're setting those intentions for the betterment of all, it boomerangs to every single one of us, boomerangs back to you, actually, as well. Yeah, really do try and get into community if you can, in person, physically. And this split between service to self and service to others is going to become more and more and more obvious. Businesses will be less and less focused on profit and what's for the good of the earth. You know, as I've mentioned in the past, indigenous tribes don't think about money and profit. I mean, they just operate in a society where they all just share and help each other. And in a sense, that's kind of what we're going back to. Much greater sense of community and grassroots. I think there will be more devices, and this is Pluto in Aquarius sextile to Uranus, Pluto in Aquarius sextile to Uranus in Pisces. It's still going to be in Pisces for several months next year. More devices that will help us jump into a state of transcendence, because that's what Neptune's about. And yes, there's sort of Google and Apple virtual reality goggles that can help you with that. And I mentioned with Kathy, there's also a company called REM Space that has programs where they can connect dreamers so they can synchronize their dreams between two people. But there will be more and more devices to help you make that jump into transcendence. Up to you whether you rely on the technology or you do it yourself through your own consciousness. But they will be more available. Yes. I believe this revolutionary spirit, this protest movement in many places will turn into a big freedom movement, because there will be issues around civil rights, human rights. They will continue to rumble on again at those lower levels. But the freedom movement, I think more and more people connecting in sovereignty will become much stronger and much more obvious. And this is the beginning in 2025 of a change in the socioeconomic and political structure from top down to more horizontal. Just the beginning. We have many years to go, but just the beginning. AI will grow exponentially. I mean, we're all aware of that with GBT and all of the other things that are happening with AI, it will be harder and harder to distinguish what's real, what's not. What was generated by a human and what was generated by AI. So we have to sharpen our discernment with that. Robots will take on more and more of the repetitive jobs that will raise unemployment. What does that do in terms of, again, the socioeconomic structure and wages and time for those people? Some very big social questions here, ethical questions. And I think we will actually, again, at these, kind of 3D levels, see robots more and more often just in day-to-day life. I've been hearing from some people in America that if you go to a theater, perhaps, or a high status establishment, often a robot will actually greet you at the door. Very obviously a robot. Just quite bizarre, isn't it? So I think they will become more normal, if that's the kind of normal you want. So be aware that is one direction of travel on that more technological timeline. But of course, many of us may be running a mile from that, and the flying cars and all of that, those technological explosions. I think there will be many more automated drone deliveries as well. What could be the way that Amazon delivers by truck or by car right now, they could be delivered in future by drone. And there are all kinds of questions around regulation of airspace. There's going to be an awful lot about air, about aviation, about the out there. I think travel will be transformed from the way it is right now, particularly air travel, into ultimately something much faster and going much further, space travel. But it will go through a bit of a bumpy period, I think, and there may even next year be limits on travel. Saturn limits square to Jupiter, particularly in the sort of spring to summer Northern Hemisphere period. There could be, for whatever reasons, extreme weather events or whatever, some limitations, particularly on air travel. But I also think things like shipping and fishing may see some disruptions as well. I can Saturn conjunct Neptune, limitations on fishing, limitations on shipping. I think shipping could be quite a difficult area in 2025. And so we will evolve different forms of moving around, different forms of trading, different forms of moving around our Earth. And that's going to be quite interesting. I think, yes, big water events, March, April. In May, Uranus comes to exactly conjunct Sedna, dwarf planet, goddess of the Arctic seas, at 1 degree 37 minutes of Gemini. And that could be a very interesting time for happenings at sea. Because I remember when Sedna moved into Gemini in 2023, do you remember there was a submersible craft? It was around about June of 2023, and many lives were lost, or several, I think 5 people died in that submersible when Sedna had literally that week moved into Gemini. I think with the conjunction of Uranus with Sedna in Gemini at 1 degree 37 of Gemini. And that happens on the 24th of May, I believe, 24th of May. Just watch around that time. I think May could be an interesting time for events to do with shipping and the seas. So we'll see what happens. I think we will become more aware of our biological changes, particularly on the higher timeline of love and heart-centeredness, that we are shifting increasingly from carbon to crystalline, becoming more of the light body. Robert Edward Grant, in a wonderful video called Aging Backwards, talks about working out the geometry of how we are able to shift from carbon to crystalline. He talks about the geometry of silicon and phosphorus, etc., Brilliant video, well worth watching. But we will feel this lightness of being. We may eat less, we may eat more plant-based. More of us may get involved in sun gazing. Please be careful with doing that. Be careful with what you're doing. Don't just rush off and gaze at the sun. It has to be done very carefully and progressively. Whole other area I think that will be interesting in terms of our bodies is stem cell medicine. That miraculous injection I had on my knee, my right knee, which I've talked about with you before, platelet-rich plasma, is essentially taking your own stem cells. And that, I believe, will be used much more widely, different areas of the body, not just the knees. And I just read last week about the potential for new teeth being grown using stem cell medicine, your own stem cells. So I think stem cell medicine, and this is really linked to Pluto square to Homer. Remember, Homer could kind of birth babies from all over her body, transform herself from an old crone to a young maiden. This is stem cell medicine. And the very week that Homer entered Scorpio, and I always think that Scorpio has that suggestion or association of injectables, the sting in the tail, the injectable, that's the week I had my PRP injection in my knee. So I think stem cells is going to be a big, big area. Lots of new healing technologies. There are going to be huge innovations in medicine of all kinds, genetics, plasma physics, certainly aviation. I think also anti-gravity transport. Nassim Harriman is doing a lot of work in this area. Of course, the Galactics know all about anti-gravity transport, but he, I know, is working on this, and I'll put a link for his website below. I think also robots will become much bigger in medicine, and I know that because in July 2022, I had the arthroscopy operation on my knee. And what that means is it clears out a lot of the broken bits of cartilage from your knee joint. And when I asked the surgeon how long that was going to take in the operating theatre, very precisely, he said 17 minutes. And I said, well, how can you be so precise? And how can that be so fast? I mean, how can that possibly be? And he said, because we use robots. And that was in July 2022. So robots, I believe, will be used increasingly in operations. Eventually, we'll move away from that kind of surgery. But potentially, this can be quite helpful because of the speed and the precision, I think. So not all robotic developments are necessarily bad. So galactic connections, as I say, will be much greater, and they will help to develop lots of new technologies. As I say, I'm talking to someone in January. He's going through that experience right now. More in January. There will be a blending of science and spirituality to a greater degree. This is partly Saturn in Pisces too. And more of these conscious energy devices that literally have their own consciousness that harmonize with us and the earth, as I've just been saying. And it's starting to develop now a science of consciousness. A science of consciousness is starting to develop that will be very helpful. It's kind of blend of mysticism and science. And this is an area, of course, Dr. Joe Dispenza has been so involved in. And I think we're going to have a lot of exciting developments there. There's actually something called the Blue Brain Project, and they have already discovered multidimensional geometric structures in our brain that can operate in 11 dimensions, potentially. 11 dimensions. They're called the Blue Brain Project. So, boy, are we going to be opening up our consciousness and our multidimensionality. Yeah, a lot of remembrance of ancient wisdom, as I say, as we connect to the galactics, and also we connect to the inner earth beings, and we rediscover these ancient civilizations. Yes, I think food supply may change. There could be more challenges. You know, been so many challenges to farming in so many countries. I think the old methods of food production, although they're absolutely wonderful, my goodness, I'm behind the farmers, and they couldn't work any harder. I think there will be new ways of producing food to some degree that is high nutrition. It's very nutritionally dense and high frequency. And that will help any shortcomings we have of weather extremes or whatever. I mean, I adore the farmers. I know many of them, and they do an absolutely fabulous job, and that will continue for some time. But to kind of fill in any shortages, I do believe there'll be new method. You know, hydroponics has been around for quite a long time, but that kind of thing that is healthy, high frequency, and can provide us with some very good nutrition. I think we are also going to be, with this sense of sensitivity to energy and sovereignty and mastery of our frequency, we will develop a stronger sense of spiritual responsibility in being aware that our thoughts and emotions are affecting the whole. Every word we say, every thought we think is affecting the collective. And so we're going to have that stronger sense of spiritual responsibility. We are going to be developing a gradual awareness of a shift from the mind to the heart. And I've said this in recent videos, but this is going to be really big. Because, you know, the information age, Twitter, X, TikTok, hamster attention span. It's partly because of our move to telepathy and away from a need to speak. But the heart, as we know, is the major organ, the main organ connecting us to the cosmos. It's our largest electromagnetic organ, connecting us to the electromagnetic field. But there's something that is going to emerge that's another dimension of the heart, the sacred heart, the energetic heart. Again, more of this to come in January. That is going to educate us, teach us a lot more about the heart. And of course, it isn't a pump. We know that it's a vortex of energy. We now know that from this really goes back to Steiner, actually. And Dr. Tom Cowan has talked about this. Many other people are talking about the heart as a vortex, but it's more than this. So a wonderful man whose work I follow sometimes, David Manning, he's talking about a connection between the human heart and the galactic heart. Everything's fractal. We know that. Everything's fractal in the universe. And we're going to be understanding that. And David Manning is teaching more about that. Yeah, this state of transcendence, this state of radiant presence and stillness, that's precious. The more you can do that, the better position you will be in through the coming years, all of them. But because of extreme weather events and things, there is this greater sense also of humanity as one coming together in compassion. And having this sense of what can we do to help the greater good? What can we do to help each other in a bigger way than we've done before? I think we are going to see some paradigm-shattering discoveries. You know, it's very interesting that when Uranus was discovered it was in Gemini when it was discovered. And Saturn is the furthest out planet that we can see with the naked eye. We can't really see beyond that. And so when Uranus was discovered, that was a paradigm-shattering event because we could go beyond the vision of the naked eye, and it was in Gemini. And so with Uranus coming back into Gemini, starting in July, we are going to have a bigger perspective on our cosmos. I have no doubt about that. A bigger perspective on our galaxy than we have had to date. That also links with Pluto in Aquarius, because as many of you know, in 1543, a previous time when Pluto was in Aquarius, that's when Copernicus published his heliocentric theory about the Earth going around the sun, not the other way around. Paradigm shattering. We are into paradigm shattering times around the planets, the galaxies, the universe, the entire cosmos. A much bigger view from the very small kind of Earth-centric view we have had. And the galactic beings are going to teach us very much about that. Also, and I was listening to the wonderful astrologer Lynn Bell, and it was just something so simple that she said, but it was brilliant, actually. And as Uranus moves into Gemini in July, she was saying we're going to be presented with a choice. And it suddenly hit me that, of course, Uranus is connected to digital devices of all kinds, the internet, digital devices, digitization. And Gemini is your neural network. And so, although they are being developed already, I believe that that is the beginning of a crucial choice point in terms of, do we choose to have sort of chips put in us like Neuralink or nanobots or whatever, because they're being talked about already as incredibly beneficial things, as you know, they're injected into your bloodstream, and they're like those little kind of Pac-Mac guys where they can go around your system and they can just heal any damage before disease develops, eat up any tumors, increase your lifespan, benefit your longevity. So, it appears to be a win-win-win, and why wouldn't you do that? Safe and effective. So I would just, of course, we all have to make our own choices about this, but I would just suggest to you to be very, very wise and very, very conscious and thinking very, very long term with that incredibly important choice point. It's almost like having, the entire internet plugged into your brain as well. You don't need to use an external device. It's all just in there. And I would just, the need to think very, very carefully about that. Where is the off switch? Who's got the control button? So, and it may well be that your choice determines which timeline broadly you go on, of the more technological timeline or the more heart-centered, loving timeline. But we all have to make our own choices. I just want to really highlight that what will appear to be a kind of no-brainer, of course you've got to do this, it's a win-win-win, benefit all the way, offer of choice. Just please weigh that more heavily than you might otherwise would. That's all I want to, I'm sure you follow my meaning here. Okay, so I think people will go through many personal endings, as well as seeing major endings out in the world in so many ways that we can barely anticipate right now, but personal endings, because there's so many of the planets changing, the outer planets are changing sign. We have a lot of retrogrades happening all around the same time, of Mercury, Venus, Mars happening, particularly in the early months of the year. So just there's a rethinking of a lot of things on the personal level. So yes, and Gandhi said it, didn't he? Be the change you want to see in the world. And that can be a very flippant statement, but absolutely embody the energy. Embody the energy that you want to see more of in the world. Love, joy, compassion, gratitude, peace. Embody it and live it. Beam it out like a lighthouse. because it's very easy to make these phrases seem trivial and flip, but it could not be more important or more profound. So later in the year, in fact, it's already operational, but late in the second half of the year, it becomes more exact. That we have a configuration forming. We have a trine between Uranus, especially when it moves into Gemini in July, because it will be an exact sign to sign trine to Pluto in Aquarius. And the midpoint of that is Neptune, particularly when it moves on to zero of Aries. It will also be joined through 2025 and 26 by Saturn. So Neptune, Saturn at the midpoint, 60 degrees either way to the trine of Uranus to Pluto. Now, this is potentially an incredibly fortuitous aspect because sextiles and trines are beneficial, they're positive and helpful. It will facilitate technological innovation. A lot of these innovations are going to be extremely helpful for humanity. As I say, just for me, the dividing line is my skin, really, in terms of invasion. The arthroscopy was a different thing because it was a very temporary invasion by the robots in the operating theatre. But yeah, I've said enough on that. But Saturn moves on fairly soon in 2026, but Neptune remains there for some time. In fact, this kind of three-legged stool stays in aspect for quite some years. It doesn't move off completely until really about 2033. And so, crediting Ray Merriman, wonderful astrology, he said that you have to go back to kind of the late 1300s, early 1400s to find anything even similar to this. And that was really the beginning of the European Renaissance and huge creativity in art and poetry and music. This is going to be an extremely creative project, but I think it's more kind of scientifically and technologically innovative. But we will also see the art and the poetry and the music too, I think, coming through. In order to get anything similar in terms of those planets, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune being in the signs that they're going to be in 2025 and ongoing, and the outer planets changing sign, even though they haven't been discovered at this point, but we can project backwards, you've got to go back about 2,500 years. That's how rare this is. On top of all of the convergences of big timelines and big cycles and small cycles that I've talked about. So a lot going to be happening, dizzying amount of events and kind of whiplash things, particularly when we have planetary retrogrades. It's going in one direction, then going in another direction. So please keep it simple. Please turn inwards. Please do the yogic belly breath. Please drop into your heart. Please make your focus, your attention, and your state of being your absolutely top priority. Your heart coherence is precious, because if you can be in, the heart math has got so much information on this, and Greg Braden talks about this a great deal, but the coherence of your heart determines the health of every cell in your body. It determines the size of your toroidal field and its strength, how you infect other people with coherence that you come into contact with, how you infect the collective. Coherence is a very valuable currency as we enter 2025 and the ongoing years. This is a real shift, a shift of pace, a shift of state. There's absolutely no going back to anything that we might have experienced as normal in the past. It's a whole new normal being built. Do be aware of the two very different collective timelines, and and really be astute in the speediness of what you're choosing on a day-to-day level. And lock onto love. Lock onto love as your docking station. And keep rolling that mantra that we use in our Sunday evening meditations, and that's now a nightly meditation at 7 p.m. UK time. I'll put the link for that below. You just join energetically, no tech, no Zoom, no recordings, no nothing. We're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. We're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. And when you keep rolling that around your head as a mantra, you can't go wrong, really. That it becomes very inclusive. It removes judgment. It removes separation, polarization. I'm right, you're wrong. It becomes a huge, loving heart that we are offering to the world, to the animals, to the trees. So a lot happening, and that's just for starters. That's just the beginning, really. So, I think there are over 50 points, 50 different themes at least that I've mentioned there. So many more to come. I mean, that's just as we enter 2025, what I'm seeing astrologically, what I'm observing. So I wanted to do this as a kind of add-on to what Kathy and I did, because she did a magnificent job, and she and her husband hatched all those incredible charts and graphics. So I want to credit both of them there. It was quite astrologically detailed, whereas this is, as I think, broader. So that may be helpful too. God bless. I'm filming this in late December, day before Christmas Day, actually. I'm filming this in 2024. Be excited about 2025. Make that your belief filter. Be excited, be joyful, be expectant, and just throw yourself into a big, loving, coherent heart. God bless. See you very soon. Thanks for listening.